Yeah, it takes a while to build that
I do
stewardship.
not know
I mean,
that.
it just doesn't.
Okay, I don't know that about us, right? That's something else, I don't know. But, okay, well, you can give it a try, you know, so like you would say, you pay the doctor, and then if they do recommend you, they'll charge you $150.
Okay, your professional people,
Paperwork,
your doctors or lawyers or,
but they'll file it, they'll fill out the forms, and they'll handle that. You just pay them
school, they're in
so it's a total of
such deep
$300
debt
a
that by the
year.
time they get out, they're gonna be 80 years old before they get the debt
So,
payment.
if you got it there, approve you, there'll be no problem. Paperwork just goes through and you'll get your card within 10 days. Then you can go to Rev Ed.
And if they become a teacher, it's
Yeah,
gonna
then you
take
go to Rev Ed,
forever.
you register as a patient there, and there's a time you go to, there's a number you can try and call, but just decide the process.
Well, at least nowadays there's
If I,
some
you know,
jobs.
then you can go down there, establish yourself as a patient at Rev Ed, and then you can go in there
They
and
say,
they'll tell you,
because
you
our,
need to know. I'll get you.
employment
I'll
rate
see
is
that,
supposedly way down and
for
people are,
Sunday. Tonight, so I remember.
a lot of the jobs are very
I
specialized.
addressed the place on the first floor.
And our companies think that somebody else ought to train the employees, they don't want to,
I went last year.
they want to hire somebody that can just walk in and just,
Since I have to take a day off of work.
Oh, yeah, that is.
I'm gonna take a day off of work for the UM.
I was just gonna say, that would be my opinion.
Yeah, I like it better, yeah. So I'm gonna do that, yeah, but, I'll get you the address for that place. It's a kind of a long drive, but it's either Maryland, they have a doctor, and then a lot of them, you have to file your paperwork, whereas this place up at First River is a branch office of the central one. So it's much easier to get paperwork than to file. It's worth the extra drive to do it. They send everything for you.
I mean, I hate to break into the revelation time, but.
well,
Always still have.
our bishop, Bishop Oshabata likes to have an opportunity for, not only, just, clergy, but for him to have an interaction with lay people in terms of what's going on in the church. And so this is his methodology for doing it. And there was 197 out of our South District at this. So the basement of Christ Church was full. And it was basically a time when we started out with a kind of a devotional preparatory time, and then with communion, and then they presented the three options that the commission have put forward, and then they took some questions. There weren't a lot of questions associated with that, but there was no time for what do I want to say? Speeches of well, we did some discussion around the table, but it wasn't a time of hearing arguments for or against one of the proposals. What the bishop also wants us to understand, and his primary focus is, who are we going to be as St. Paul's, as Christ Church, as Desert Skies, who are we going to be the day after the special conference meets, regardless of what they decide. And the point is, the Judicial Council has opened it up so that there can be other proposals submitted besides the three that the commission did. And one out of the three, the commission really didn't do. It was kind of forced down their throat by a group. But regardless, who are we going to be as a church when we, the day after that special conference? His point is, we still have ministry to do. We still have people that we need to minister to. We still need to have a relationship among ourselves, and then we also have to be in relationship with the community around us. So I think his point is more one of hope, saying, regardless of what they say, we can continue to do ministry, we can continue to be St. Paul's, we can continue to do the ministries that we're doing, and maybe some more. And that we have a choice. More than likely, we're going to have a choice in that. I just don't think that things are going to get crammed down our throat that we don't want. But the reality is, we need to choose who we're going to be and be that. And hopefully we'll all be United Methodists, but even if we aren't United Methodists, we'll still be doing ministry. We'll still be doing whatever. So that's, and don't get me wrong, that's not the way that I would hope that it would go, but the reality is, we can be church regardless of what is decided at the special conference. So that was kind of his message to us is, be church, be the church that you are, be better, do more, and don't worry about. He kind of told a little silly aspect. There was only one person in the room who will have a vote. It's one of our delegates who will be going to that general conference. In our annual conference, there's 2 people who have votes out of the 600 people who are going to be there. We only have 2 votes. So, we have no control really associated with that, but we do have control with who we are, what kind of ministry we can be here. So that's where we need to focus. Yeah.
I had a question.
I don't have an answer.
I've asked several people, do you think our speaker Sunday was just happenstance?
I don't think Tony knew that he was going to share his life story as he did, but no, he was invited to be there to share the HIV and AIDS ministry that T-Han is. And I think he was just being open about sharing what his life story was.
Yeah, I was listening and then I went into shock.
Well, Tony said there was really no negative comments associated with it. So his message was received, and he was welcomed and blessed. So
Okay.
great on you guys. Great on you guys.
I think it's for years now.
Huh?
Nobody's rude.
Yeah. Well, that could be part of it, but the reality is that, huh?
It seems to me that for quite a few years now, God is calling many gays and lesbians into the ministry.
Well,
At least calling them to the church. So we can have this discussion now.
Yeah.
But
10 years from now.
having said that, tonight, I think we're looking at the core of the book of Revelation. And what we were wrestling with last week, and what calls us in this passage as well, is what does it mean to be church? What does it mean to be in New Jerusalem? And why and how did that happen? And who is this God that we worship, that we honor, that we are connected to and owe so much to? So one of the things that is different about the Bible, if you're gonna read a novel, generally what happens if the climax occurs in the middle of the novel and then you have 200 pages left of the novel?
go back and get another book.
Come on. You flip to the last page.
Flip to the last page. But our Bible is kind of that way, you see, because where is the high point? Beginning of the New Testament. I mean, it's in the story of Jesus Christ. And in the book of Revelation, there's kind of a minor story, because what you are hearing in this passage tonight, which comes from the 12th chapter, is the gospel. But it's the gospel in its beginning with God and who God really is, that allows the gospel to be the gospel. And where does the story begin in chapter 12?
Jesus. No, it seems to be that, but beginning of creation.
Where does it begin? It begins in heaven. Where is this taking place? It takes place in heaven. This is the beginning. But there are two beings. There's the woman and what? The dragon. Yeah. Mike. It's too bad that my granddaughters haven't read this, because they love dragons.
I knew this was going to be bad. I thought dragons were good.
So this begins the story, and the way we know this is heaven. It says a great portent appeared in heaven. What's another word for the word portent?
Sign. It says behind another sign.
So there's a sign begins, and the sign is a woman clothed with the sun, with the moon under her feet, and as her head and crown and 12 stars. Now, who does the author say always depicted, associated with the sun? God and in Christ, the Godhead, or the triune God. So God is. So what the author says, that's a good indication that the woman, by her depiction there, and not only is she depicted as God, what's the other distinguishing factor about her? She's pregnant. Isn't this quite scandalous that we have a God who's pregnant?
Well, it's just a manner of speaking. It's just a way of visualizing.
Pardon?
It's just a way of visualizing the idea.
Okay, way of visualizing. What is pregnancy a visualization of?
Life.
So pregnancy indicates new life, life-giving, sharing life. You know, life is, I think, a key element there, and if anybody's going to argue with the depiction of why do we see that a woman is a great depiction for God?
Because God is the source of life.
God is the source of life. God is the source of creation, the source of all that is life, and kind of the totality of life, life at all levels.
So why is woman exalted in this instance right here? Why is it woman instead of something else or someone else?
Well, I think it has to do with it. What is God doing? Assuming the woman is pregnant, is giving birth. What is God is sharing life
Through that woman.
Through that woman. Oh, well, God is the woman.
She's sharing.
Yeah.
It's not a woman in terms of being a human woman,
You know, see, we don't talk about it in this way, and that's why it's important that we're talking about a vision. But either John is interpreting it this way, or this is actually what he's seeing in this vision is this sign, which is a woman who is pregnant, and the woman gives birth, and the dragon is standing in the birthing room. I have had the opportunity to see one of my grandchildren born. I didn't get to see any of my children because I was too old.
You were
when
in the
that
military.
happened. Well, no, I mean, it was an earlier age, and so fathers weren't allowed in the delivery room.
1970, the first one in the living room. My husband was in the military base.
Well, my second child, I dropped my wife off at the military hospital, went to park the car, came back, and I had a daughter. We cut it a little close. But the dragon is standing right there, and says, then the dragon stood before the woman who was about to bear a child, and so that he might devour her child as soon as it was born. And she gave birth to the son, a male child. And now they're getting a little patriarchal again. Who is to rule all nations with a rod of iron. But her child was snatched away. And what does the author? What is the author? What is he saying by the use of that term "snatched"?
That the dragon probably did snatch the child, and then God snatched
It away. So the indication that the author says is the dragon must have had the child for a moment, and then the child was snatched away back by the woman, and then the woman flees. Do you understand the essence of, first of all, God is sharing essence. God's essence. And we understand that the DNA, to use today's terms, of the child is God's DNA. It is in essence God. So God is sharing God with the child, and so we have that theology when we talk of Jesus, when we talk of Christ, that we have that theology. But here, John is seeing this in beginning of time, and what he says is that God planned this event from the beginning of time. That this wasn't a response to the dragon's rebellion. Who is the dragon? Satan. The devil. As we talked earlier from Enoch, the fallen angels, the group that rebelled, supposedly a third of heaven rebelled against God's authority. In other words, what is the dragon trying to do by snatching the child? To be God. He wants to take that essence. If he's going to eat the child, he's going to eat the essence. He's going to God. And so this is a description of the primary sin of rebellion, of not wanting to accept God as God and be subservient to that, to be one of creation. See that the dragon was part of creation. All of those who followed the dragon were part of creation. Angels are part of creation. They are seen as, in Jewish and Christian tradition, seen as part of creation. They are created beings. At least in this story, that's how you would understand it. The 12 stars are 12 tribes, probably. So this is probably a story that maybe is not in our scripture, but is probably common within the tradition of our Bible. It may have been a story that was told through the Mishnah and other means where it could have been passed on rabbinically. It may not be part of our Bible story, but it is part of the tradition of our Jewish heritage as well as our Christian heritage. Questions, comments? Am I beating the drum too hard, or this? What you're seeing is what has happened heavenly before it happens historically. The fact that the Son is born in heaven before the Son is born on earth. We talk about our Christian faith being an ancient story. It is really an ancient story. It goes all the way back to the foundations, our foundations, or our understanding of the foundations of the universe, in terms of God's presence, God's self-giving. We worship in the Eucharist, God's self-giving. And then we have the war that takes place in heaven. It says war broke out in heaven, and Michael, we don't hear about Michael very much, but the Episcopal Church loves the Michael name, because you can always, I bet you can't go into a city in the United States that there is not a Michael's and All Angels Episcopal Church someplace. So they really like Michael. But Michael was the head archangel, and he leads those who throw devil Satan out of heaven. And of course, we are the lucky recipient of Satan in earth, and so his realm is here. But then it becomes kind of interesting because the woman is on earth as well. And so when the dragon saw that he had been thrown down to earth, he pursued the woman who had given birth to the male child. But the woman was given the 2 wings of the great eagle, so that she could fly from the serpent into the wilderness to her place where she is nourished for a time and a times and a half of time. And I think in your book, in the study guide, it talks about the 42 days, 42 years, 40 months, 42 months. Well, that is the same as, this is just another way of saying 42 months. When they're referring to the tribulation and the bad things happening to fallen Babylon, it's 42 months. When it's in favor of God, it's generally described in another way. The times, half time, and so on, and
Mine says
Three-quarters.
1260
1260
days.
days, and see, they're saying the same thing, but they're saying it differently because who it applies to is different. Isn't that a unique kind of
I'm
ironic?
thinking this may have been the normal time to breastfeed the child.
Okay. I hadn't heard that, but yeah, there's that point.
Say that again, please?
Could be a time of breastfeeding the child.
Breastfeeding.
I'm very suspicious of calling a time and half a time, that a time means a year. Because other places in the Bible it says that, 1,000 years is only an eye blink to God.
Mhm.
So, when they say a time, I don't think we can pin it down that,
No,
or even 1260 days. What is a day?
all I'm saying is that they are
Some
the
unit.
they are the same unit
Yeah,
described
same
differently.
unit, yeah, same unit, yeah. I think, I disagree with
But
people
I
saying
would-
it's gonna be exactly.
No, you're absolutely right. That's
crazy.
true. We can't take it as being a designated exact time.
Gregorian day.
Yeah,
Exactly.
or associated chronological time.
Right.
It's Kairos time. Okay. It's the time that was needed for whatever was taking place, but it's a unit, and all I want to point out is there's two ways of describing the same unit, whatever it is. And in one way, they're describing it as it applies to fallen Babylon, and the other way, they're describing it as it applies to God's side, to New Jerusalem, so to speak, if you want to use that term. It also says that, but earth came to the help of the woman, and it has a way, the earth opened its mouth and swallowed the river that the dragon had poured from its mouth. Then the dragon was angry with the woman, I can't imagine that, and went off to make war on the rest of her children. So, not only is the dragon, we see the woman, and I know probably in the back of my mind we're thinking about, well, the woman is Mary, and we know that Mary is, had the same thing, because Mary had to run from Herod, and who was Herod? Herod was he was on Satan's side, and so, we can go down that path physically and historically, but this is more than that. This is God and the dragon fighting against God, and then when the dragon realizes that he'll never have access to the woman, then all of a sudden we become the object of Satan's anger. And
So that's like before the Garden of Eden, because obviously the first time that Satan made war against human beings would have been with Adam and Eve in the garden. So that all this would have happened, I would think.
you can take it,
Sort of
you
before
can
that.
go down that, yes, you can.
That was the first humans.
What we're seeing, though, is the fact that who wins? The woman or the dragon? The woman. The woman is in the dragon's territory. The woman is on earth. But the dragon can't touch her. Because God's creation is protecting God. The dragon is powerless to accomplish the dragon's ultimate goal. So who wins? The woman. God wins. The other way that the author describes this whole story is, how many of you play chess? Chess master.
Oh, yeah, you bet. All about strategy.
Well, it is.
George.
Have you heard the term mating net?
No, I haven't.
Mating net. What it means that generally in a chess match. The object is checkmate. I mean, that's the ultimate object, where you basically capture the opponent's king. And in other words, you get to the place where the king cannot move without being captured by one of the pieces on opposing side. That's the ultimate, is to get to that checkmate. But for a master, early in the game, through generally a sacrifice, and it might be even, let's say I'm the black, I may choose to sacrifice my queen to put myself in a position that if my opponent chooses to take the sacrifice to move whatever his piece is, which is probably going to be less powerful than my queen, when he takes my queen, he now has set himself up to lose the game. That's the mating net.
Oh, NET.
NET.
Okay.
The game has been won. It hasn't been totally played out to the checkmate, but I mean, it's just a matter of now making the moves, and the ultimate outcome is
That's when the other guy goes like that.
it's when the other guy, if he's smart and sees the moves and recognizes that he has played into the trap, yes, he may just forfeit the game, because the game has been won. Although all of the moves have not been made, the game has been won, and it's been won because of a sacrifice.
That's interesting.
Does that sound like our faith?
It sounds like Jesus for all of us.
Yes, exactly.
Sacrifice.
It's God.
It is God.
Even in ball games, they do a sacrifice, right?
Yes, sacrifice bunt. The
The
sacrifice.
winning run.
That's right.
The concept of sacrifice.
Concept of sacrifice has meaning for us, but I mean, this is a chess game, and what the author is saying, what is being described here, is the fact that God has won the battle. Satan is still running around doing his thing, and you know, still harassing New Jerusalem, still harassing all of us. But the ultimate outcome has already been decided, because the mating net has been played. Satan has already lost. There's no way that Satan can win because of the sacrifice. God has given. See, something that Satan didn't plan on was that God would actually die. God would actually die for us. Yeah, for us doofuses. That must be an Episcopal term. So I think that's why I want us to, this is the chapter that I really want you guys to hear, because that's, Revelation is retelling the gospel story in a little different way.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of cool, isn't it?
Yeah.
And yeah, there's things that are going to happen. And yeah, that silly Satan is still running around. But the reality is, we have the opportunity to be a part of the winning side. The other aspect of this, which I think is important for us, is to understand that we have the freedom that even even starting in heaven, when God created with a freedom. Even the heavenly angels had the freedom to either be loyal to God or to be rebellious. That freedom is built into all of God's creation. We have the freedom to choose. I think inherent in this story is the idea of freedom. Freedom for us to choose who we're going to be loyal to. And then comes the hard part. Now this is where it gets to be interesting. And I think Lori, I think you asked a question the other night associated with how do we live? Was it you, maybe, or somebody
Remember,
else?
no, it was me, I'll own it.
What does it really mean to live in New Jerusalem? What does it really mean to be the church? And to how are we? And the flip side of that is how do we become complicit in fallen Babylon?
I think she said when we were here last that how do you know when you're moving into the territory of New Jerusalem or Old Babylon? I think that was kind of how you put it.
Yes, that's how you know. When you're gonna start crossing the line.
Let's have a discussion about prisons.
You know, when they write these books, they don't know what you're gonna do to them.
Well, in fact, nobody, when they read a book, knows what
Other people will do with their words, exactly, all right.
Well, I think in there he has talked about what the churches are. He mentioned last. We didn't cover it, but let me someplace I can. Maybe I'll find it. The witness of Christ in the church is on page 58 in your book. The last 20, and this book was written in the 80s, I think.
Oh, it's got some I remember.
The assassination, in the last 20, 30 years, the church has shown the witness of Christ in the assassination of Bishop Oscar Romero, slain in the midst of the celebrating the Eucharist in San Salvador because of his witness against the destructiveness of the fallen Babylon in El Salvador. Was our country complicit in that?
Oh, yeah.
Yes, it was. We were we may not have known it at the time, but we found out later how complicit we were, didn't we? The murder of Father Jerry Papiescu in Poland. I don't know whether I pronounced that anywhere close to being right, but I think it's Papiescu is how that's for his dangerous witness to the power of Christ in the midst of Poland's oppressive government. He stood up to the government. And they were trying to, what was the story, you guys with the great memory? It had to do with labor unions, did it not? And it was a labor movement.
Oh, yeah, like
Solidarity.
Solidarity and all of that the government was trying to break that up.
That was the communists.
Yeah, and taking power, but it was taking power away from the workers. We've not seen that in our country, have we? Okay, well, you can go ahead and read. Martin Luther King, we're all very well aware of. Mondragon in Sandinista oppression in the Church in Nicaragua, the resistance to the nuclear destructiveness of fallen Babylon. Do you guys remember In Defense of Creation? You who have been part of the Methodist Church for a while? the bishops wrote a letter, this was in 86, 87, wrote a letter to our church. It was titled In Defense of Creation, and it was about denuclearization and what the effects of a nuclear war would be, and how unsustainable and so forth. I mean, that's taking a stand against what was, at that point in time, we were producing nuclear weapons like it's going out of style, both here and in the United States. There was enough nuclear weapons to destroy the world, I can't remember how many times over.
So there's still, after the.
And we still have.
It's five times right now.
Yeah. It's come down a little bit, but it's still too many.
Well, my daughter-in-law's brother was assigned to the Pentagon to keep track of where the nuclear everything was.
Stockpile.
And he said his biggest problem is to convince the guys that are in charge that they don't own that nuke. That the people of the United States own that nuke.
So see, there's plenty of places for us to take.
I know, I don't wanna own any.
Unfortunately,
I'm gonna write a letter saying, you know, the part of my tax dollar that goes to pay for that, you can take that away.
Yeah.
You can use that for poor people instead.
Well, and see, that's what, in many ways, that's why we as a country are different. I mean, in most cases, the rest of the world sees us. They see us. They don't see us as having a titular head who is making all the decisions that kind of, you know, if I go to a country where it's like Saudi Arabia, there's a king who is making all the decisions. Well, we can say that the people there don't have authority. They don't own part of the. I don't think they have nukes, but not sure. But they. That's a different situation than us, where we vote and we elect people who we offer authority to. And so, in some ways, we bear some responsibility that people in other countries don't bear. Back to prisons. I'm just using this as to get an indication. There's probably two types of justice. Most of you have been with me for a while, can answer this pretty easily. Two types of justice. Both start with an R. Retributive and restorative. This is all about punishment. This is about normative relations. Something has to be restored to get back here. Here, something just gets punished. Who, in our system in the United States, who is the victim? Nope, it's the state. Here, there is actually a personal victim.
Oh, they're saying the state is the victim. That needs to be.
Well, it's, the state moves in and says the state is the one who has been harmed, even though maybe it's an individual who has been robbed or even been murdered. The state becomes the one who then steps in and prosecutes and becomes the victim. It only becomes restorative when here you begin to work not only with the victim, but you begin to work with the perpetrator. And you're trying to bring about wholeness. In our justice system, when it's retributive, then it's all about punishment. We send people to prison. What do we do with them in prison?
Use them, lock them up,
Yeah.
throw away the key.
It's rare if we do any restoring at all.
We educate them
It becomes,
into
they become
the
better
thing
criminals.
that they were doing to get
Yeah,
there.
exactly.
Some few people rehabilitate themselves.
We do, there are some institutions that do a real good job of rehabilitation. They do provide drug counseling for those who have, when I served on a Kairos team several times, all of the men, I was in the men's prison, all the men who were on my weekends, I would say 99.9% of them, drugs. It was either alcohol or drugs of some sort were part of the equation that put them in prison. So they were getting drug help. They were getting help with drugs. Most of these prisoners were from Alaska, and Alaska's DOC is probably more progressive than most. So they were getting training. They had access to education. They had benefits that most of the prisoners who are in Arizona prisons don't have. So I guess my point is, for us as a church, where should we be? We should be working in this restorative area. This is where we need to support. This is where the culture is. This is where our culture is. I can guarantee you go out on the street and it's all about, just get rid of the SOBs. Just get them out of our sight. Get them out of our community. Get them out. We don't want to have to deal with them. What happens? The perpetrator happened to be a father of 4 children and leaves a wife and 4 kids without any means of support or caring. So the family is broken, and we have no means of taking care of that family. We don't. I mean, that's not part of this system. But yet, see, it can be part of this system. I'm just throwing that out as an example. We can bring up just about any societal issue that we have, and we can see, if we work at it a little bit, we can see where the culture is, and we can see where God is calling us to be. And that's I guess where how I'm kind of answering, how do we differentiate ourselves and listen to what God would have us do, as opposed to what the culture is saying us to do. Do we have some good laws? Yes. Does our culture do some good things? Yes. But there are places where the church has a higher calling to do more than what culture understands we should be. Is it okay, we've had this discussion on wealth. Is it okay that in our society, 1% of our population has 50% of the wealth? How does that work? How does that work in our society? And yeah, we can hear both sides, but I think it's an issue that we have to wrestle with. I think that God calls us to wrestle with.
Well, I think that's where Kairos, as far as supporting both the prisoner and the families, is.
Kairos is part of this restorative justice issue. There's more that could be done. When I was in Coolidge on my first pastorate, I was on there was a very progressive judge, happened to be a very strong Christian, Judge O'Neill, in Pinal County, who decided that we ought to have, actually he listened to one of his administrative assistants by the name of Bordoveski. George was very strong on restorative justice. He was a good Episcopalian. And he got Judge O'Neill to support restorative justice for juveniles. And so all juveniles had the choice when they were adjudicated to say, yes, I will take restorative justice, or I'll let a judge decide. And a majority of them came to a restorative justice panel. Each one of the communities in Pinal County established restorative justice panels. And so the kids came to these restorative justice panels, and we interviewed them and decided, generally what we found out, that it wasn't just the kids' problems, that it went back to the family, and it also went to the community. There may not have been activities, or may not have been support in the community for who their family was, and so on. So we then tried to do some things for this kid besides just sending him. Some of the kids went to spend some time in juvenile detention, but they generally also were helped in either finding a job, they were helped to pay back, they were given opportunities to understand that if they stole something or shoplifted, how that impacted the whole community. That it raised prices for all the rest of us, because somebody had to pay for those goods, and it was paid for by everybody in the community having to pay higher prices. There was one case that I remember specifically where a young gal, her parents had taken in some cousins because their parents were in trouble. And so her parents had taken 2 other children in, and they couldn't take care of the children they had. And so this young gal was caught shoplifting at Walmart, and was told she could never come back to Walmart. But what she was shoplifting was a pair of bra and panties, because she only had one pair. She only had one pair of panties and one bra, and every night she had to wash those out by hand before she went to school. So what we learned was that there was a family problem, that the family needed help. And so we went to some of the churches and got help from the churches to help this family out, and to do some things to try to alleviate the problem that caused her to make this choice. So that's what restorative justice is about.
It's an educational model. And when I was retiring from the school district, they had just gotten to the point where they were beginning to hold in-service workshops for teachers and administrators on restorative justice.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how far it's gone. I didn't stay in touch.
Quite a lot in Rochester, New York right now, partly because the Gandhi Institute relocated from Memphis, Tennessee to Rochester several years ago. And the Gandhi Institute is very big on restorative justice, and they've had a large impact in the community.
I think Wisconsin was one of the strong leaders in restorative justice, at least when I was involved, and also Minnesota So it's, but it's an Old Testament practice. If you read Leviticus, you find out that you don't just take away a person's means of supporting themselves. That there are restorative things you are asked to do. The idea of gleaning, the story of Ruth, is one of a restorative justice situation where you allow some for those who are impoverished and to do some things that are restorative. But there's you know, how if somebody steals your mule, you don't just go out and, you know, wipe them out. There are some restorative things that take place. So what I'm saying is that this is biblical. It is Christian. It is Jewish. It is part of who we are religiously. And so we can take issues like that and break them down and see where I think we all know that we are called to be. We ought to know that we ought to be about life. What are some other things? What is it in? Is it in? I'm buried here. Help me out, you biblical scholars. What are the gifts of the Spirit?
Generosity, kindness, goodness,
Generosity. Gentleness.
self-control.
Self-control. We're not going to talk about that.
Not in this class, no.
Add an example of that. Patience, yes. Oh.
Yeah, right.
Give me some now.
You know, want it right now.
Anne's window in Mexico.
Peace.
Where is 7?
Goodness. Love, joy,
Did we say those?
love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, gentleness.
I think we did a pretty good job. We got most of them anyways. But we think of these things that, what does Paul says, against these there are no laws. Against these there are no laws. We always look at this and we say, well, this is what I'm working on personally. This is kind of our personal charter to work on. But let's not make this just a personal charter. Let's make this a church charter. Let's make it who we are as the group of Christians. You know, each one of us can be kind in some way or other. Each one of us can be gentle with each other and with the others that we meet outside. And we as a church, when we gather together, when we hear a message like we did Sunday morning, even if we disagree with it, we can be kind, we can be gentle, we can be compassionate, we can listen. Even if we disagree, we can have these characteristics, and we can even have these characteristics when we are disagreeing. And in our conversations. This is, you know, we hear today this idea of generosity, I don't think is really a very strong part of our culture. It used to be, I think, but I don't think today it is part of our culture. I think if you are a generous person, you are somewhat atypical.
another word for that. In our society, it's called sucker.
Sucker? Oh, okay. All right.
That's the negativity of it.
Right. I knew a woman some years ago, I don't associate with those people anymore, but she was saying that it was so much better than me, because, you know, she lived in a fabulous house, and she had a fabulous car, et cetera, and I told her how much money I gave to charity per year, and she thought I was just some kind of a stupid fool. I said, I don't put value on those things you have.
But, you see, the culture says, work hard,
Culture's
get it
hard.
all, and it's all yours.
Mhm.
That's the cultural mores, I think, today.
You know, when we lived in Mexico, I think these.
Stop arguing with me, George.
These qualities were more exemplified down there in our community 20 years ago than they are now in the US.
Yeah.
Well, I think
Those
they're
words,
still exemplified with poor people, because you see that poor people and working people, I see stories forwarded to me on Facebook all the time where, you know, a poor person it gives half of what they have to another poor person.
Because they don't understand, they walk the walk and they know what
Yeah.
it is.
Well, I think if you went online and
Widow's banks.
I think of just about any study that you can find online by any reputable higher education group that anything I've read over the last 20 years indicates that the more well off are the less generous. And it's pardon?
You try to protect what you have.
Yeah, you try to protect what you have. You become married to what you have, and you become a slave to it. Exactly.
Never enough.
Now you're preaching the gospel again.
To the point where, you know, you literally are emotionally incapable of being satisfied with what you have.
I think that's very true. It becomes a psychological issue that we have to deal with, but it's also a faith issue, and it's a spiritual growth. So, there is a place where we, as the church, need to counter what's in the culture, because I hear what's in the culture in the church frequently. We need to work on what it means to be stewards and what the idea of stewardship is. We've lost some of that. Well, I think most of us were, and again, I was a Republican at that point in time when Kennedy came into office. But what was Kennedy's message?
Ask not what the country can do for you, but what you can do to the country.
It was one of, what can you do for the betterment of, it's not,
Country in the world.
Peace Corps.
yeah, he started the Peace Corps, that became an object. So, see, there was maybe a little bit more. Doesn't mean that there still wasn't the 1% that was insanely rich and that sort of thing, but it was there was a different culture. One of my parishioners in Coolidge, his grandfather was farming during the Great Depression, and he shared that his grandfather had told him that the Great Depression was much different than I was there in 2008 when we had the crash and recession and the Great Recession, quote unquote. And his comment was it was different because in the Great Depression everybody was poor and everybody shared a little bit of what they had. It was everybody was affected by that event, and so therefore they knew that their neighbor was in need because they were in need. And so, you know, if you had a ham and they had butter, then you shared. If you had something that your neighbor could use, you shared it. It was, you knew that everybody was in the same boat. And so I think that he was just sharing how much different it was that in today's market, there's always some who are not affected by these, and so therefore we don't share like we are called to share with one another.
That's communism.
Yeah.
Well, that's I'm with you, sister, but I'm not going down that road.
That's what I say.
There was a story on TV
People
news
share, that's communism.
last week, and it told about a young man in a high school back east. I don't even remember the state now. But the principal said that he could no longer play varsity football because, did anybody else see him? He was homeless.
Yeah, that's very
And
sad.
because he didn't have the right address and the right zip code, they refused to let him play. And somebody in the community heard the story, and they did one of these GoFundMe projects, and they were able to raise enough money for him and his family to get a house and to be able to get back into school. And he was graduating with honors, and it was just such a
Some college
uplifting
gave him a
story.
scholarship.
Yep, got a scholarship.
And see, here's the difference. We live in a culture where that is a unique story, or to us sounds like a unique story. And Mary, it said exactly what I was thinking. It should not be a unique story. It should be who we are.
Right.
That's being that everywhere, all the time, is New Jerusalem.
Right.
When it only occurs occasionally, that's fallen Babylon.
Yes.
I think that's the contrast.
But our churches could be a New Jerusalem for people who are in trouble in our communities.
Amen.
And the kindness thing has bled over to the schools too, because my this is a kind school. It's through Ben's
Yeah.
Bell. This is a
that's
kind
right.
school, and they're using that to fight bullying.
Well, that's what.
And Ellen DeGeneres' motto has been be kind to each other for
Yeah.
decades.
I remember an episode or a video that was on the internet several years ago about a young man whose father died, and his mother and he had to move to a new community so that she could get a job. She couldn't get a job in the community that they were at, so they moved to a new community. So here he was a new person in school, and initially nobody would talk to him. He was, and there was nothing really different. He was just a new kid, and it was a big school, and so he made a decision that he would hold the door open.
Yeah.
And he started holding the door open he got to school early. Well, then we'll just hold the door open for people. Well, finally, after a few days, the kids began to notice that the same kid was holding the door for them. So then they began to talk to him, and it went on from there. And he ended up, graduating again with honors as a very highly connected student. He started several movements like that within his school. It was.
And the sit with me at lunch movement.
So, there are things like that are happening in the culture. I would say those are happening because the church is in the culture and is helping those things happen.
But part of the problem, though, is that all these young people don't go to church anymore. They don't believe. I've got a brother that never even goes to church.
I think the issue is not that.
And they don't do anything for charity at all.
Well, there's part of that too. There was a book published by, it was part of the progressive church movement. It says they love Jesus, but they hate the church. And there's much out there of a movement where they understand what Jesus is calling us to do, they don't think that the church has done enough to follow Jesus, and so you're right, they walked away from the church. In terms of the giving and that sort of thing, I think that is a problem. And the church needs to become more of a follower of Jesus so that they can be active in that.
Well, and some Christians, mostly older ones, but not necessarily, that have a large platform and a large television audience and so forth, have done more for the devil, than any evil person in the world, because they are literally driving young people away from the church with statements about how gays and lesbians should be jailed or murdered or put in concentration camps, and not just that, single mothers, should be punished, and all these kinds of negative things that Jesus never taught. So you get young people thinking that Jesus said this, Jesus said that, and I often see these things. It's like, what? Jesus never said that. It's just, Pat Robertson, or sadly Franklin Graham, or one of these other people, and they're just keeping people out of the church in droves.
I had to have of course, I came into the ministry late in my 50s, and so when my kids were grown, and I think they were terrified when they found out because the image they had was that image. And so I had to be very specific about saying, that's not me. That's not where I'm at. That's not what I believe. I don't think that's where Christ is. My faith is totally different. And so over the years, they're still not in church, but I think they understand the church better and have a deeper understanding of what the church means and intends. So I think that's what we're called to do. We do have to battle against what we had the conversation about the C.S. Lewis book, Screwtape Letters, and we see that happening. We have people who are preaching a gospel that isn't a gospel. It's a message that is anti-gospel, if anything. So we do have that the church has to, you guys need to do it better, and we can't do it.
There's another thing that piggyback on
Jim Jones too.
and that's to get into the societal issue, because you can't separate it. You're talking about young people. While with being a teacher and working with teenagers, our curriculum is so jammed that you have to purposely take time and say, you know what, we need to sit down and talk in this classroom. And I think that's what you were referring to with the restorative circle and coming in. But there's never enough time to do it the way it needs to be done.
Well, it's not necessarily, my point is, it becomes the church in outreach. That's something that we as the church need to be a part. Now I realize we can't be in the church, but I can guarantee you the Latter-day Saint church that they have built has been within walking distance of a middle school. And they have it planned out years ahead. They know where the middle school is going to be built, if it isn't already built, and they know where their church is going to be. And they're so what I'm saying is they are trying to move into the culture to make a difference for them. And we can do this. It'd be nice if we could do the same thing. It's just that we can be inviting of people coming to the churches, but young kids and young people are not going to come to the church unless somebody brings them. And where are you going to meet them? You're not going to meet them here. You're going to meet them out there. I know I'm preaching to the choir, but that's the purpose of this study, is for us to understand that where do we live? We live in fallen Babylon. We live where there is need. we live where there are adults, children, older people, the whole group that have needs that the church can meet. If nothing else, we can get to know them.
I can go a little bit further. Going, you know, back into the schools, and, you know, you have the, dictates of the district, and of the state school board, and of the state legislature, that, you know, you need to perform. So what happens? I don't know if all of you have ever read Where the Red Fern Grows, but in the school system, the book has been tossed in 12 pages, condensed in an anthology, because the need for the testing issues, we gotta perform. Okay, and I think, I'm reading, you know, this anthology, and I said, I'm not teaching this. I said, we'll do the whole book. Well, what do you mean? We gotta do this and this and this. Okay, and you probably would hate me as one of the teachers in your school. But I said, if my kids don't perform, then we'll have the discussion. But don't tell, because there's so much, there's a lot of good literature out there. And if you can't see it from beginning to end, and have this little snippet of it, and you don't know why these characters, which are, regardless if it's a realistic fiction or a fantasy, they all have human characteristics and needs. But we're ignoring that in the school system because of performance.
Right.
So you don't have an opportunity to sit down in these restorative circles, which they'll give you 30 minutes for, okay? You get the whole class, you know, the whole classroom in there, and you're gonna fix this kid that's screwed up. You know, and that the impact of somebody else, but the bell's gonna ring.
Right.
You know, so I mean, yeah, they're gonna touch on something, but they don't go deeper.
Right.
You know, there's a lot of breadth, but not enough depth. And that's impacted all of this.
Yeah, well, that's what my point is. This is another, you know, I use that, but we could have done that as well. But what I'm saying is, what the author is saying, our faith needs to be in the midst of this. And it's not about teaching the children to pray in school. That's not the part. It is helping them to learn to live in the school. And there's a lot of things that Christian school teachers can do within the schools to benefit the life of the children that they're called to do, without being, you know, in total opposition. Maybe partly in opposition, but you don't have to go against the mandates of the state to still show children that you care about them, and to show children that there's another way to live besides the gangs that they don't. All of us in here realize 90% of the reason that a child joins a gang is it's a place to belong. Somebody cares about them. They think. So
they say the new kid in the school, they get one of the gang to go and become friends, and then all of a sudden they're in a gang.
Yeah, I mean, gangs work pretty well. They could be a pretty good church, quite honestly. I mean, their theology sucks, but the reality is that they do. It's like sometimes there's more fellowship in a bar than there is, you know, in a sanctuary. So there is much that the church is called to minister to, and don't get me. I'm not beating up on the church. You can't say that the church has failed when you really look at the task that is set before the church. But But we're not doing it on just our own human level. The story that we studied tonight tells us that God is in the midst of all of this and has already prevailed. We forget about the fact that God has prevailed. Sometimes it doesn't feel like it, but God has prevailed. It's something that maybe we need to keep telling ourselves. That God is the winner here.
But as he points out, in the book and in some of the quotations, it's said several times that many Christians are going to have to be patient and are going to have to suffer, and many are going to be murdered, and that we have to persevere to the end with our belief. So we have to play the end game, and we have to suffer the end game of those chess moves.
Well, I'm not preaching the prosperity gospel, I can tell you that.
We know that God's the ultimate winner, but we may have to suffer or die or whatever in the meantime. We may be hit with a nuclear bomb, or something personal, or something in terms of the world, or climate change, or a tornado killing hundreds of people, or like happened in Indonesia. I'm sure there were there was a whole church there, a whole Sunday school, 30 kids just buried, while they were studying the Bible. And it's not anybody's fault, but it's part of the end game.
That's right.
That God has already won, but we have to be patient in the suffering.
We are not called to be successful. We are called to be faithful. To endure, but to endure faithfully. We're called to be faithful to God. To place our trust and our faith in what God is doing. It means that we have to be discerning. I can tell you that everything that's in a Christian bookstore is not worth your time to read. So you have to be discerning. I could have said it worse than that. There's a lot of things that are clothed, the term wolves in sheep's clothing, that comes from the reality that we live in fallen Babylon, and that the church is in the midst of it. If we're not having to deal with this stuff, then we are in Ephesus, or we're in Laodicea. We're not in Sardis, or we're not in Smyrna. Those churches were roughing it because they were trying to be faithful. Being faithful brings you to those situations where some people get martyred and some people lose everything. So I can't guarantee you that by being faithful and doing everything right that you're going to be healthy, wealthy, and wise. But I can tell you that you're going to be blessed by your God. And you will be a blessing to others. And that God will be glorified. Okay?
What is more important than that?
Pardon?
What is more important than that?
Well, according to what I'm reading, not much. Any other comments? You guys get me started and I get crazy. It's all your fault.
I wanted to just make an observation on Satan's realm and the key to the shaft of the abyss, because I think Satan's realm is not just the earth, it's the whole creation. It's what we call the universe.
Right.
It's not just this planet. There are millions of bad angels living down in the center of the earth,
Right next to
they could be right next to us in another dimension, that Satan has the key to go back and forth, or they could be in other planets in this universe where Satan can bring them through those wormholes and so forth, stuff like that. But
The cleanouts are out there.
We see how
in that sense, but obviously there aren't room on this planet for millions of alternative beings that are somehow living on this planet. So to me, I think of Satan's realm as the entire
Well, it
universe.
is, you know.
Not just this planet.
Right.
But we
Yeah.
realize that all, what the story is tonight, that it started in heaven, but we are impacted through that. And moving to, like you're saying, moving to Mars or to some other planet in our galaxy does not move us out of God's realm, nor does it move us out of the realm of those who are opposed to God. So, you know, one of the study sessions tonight had to do with place and how meaningful place is. And the reality is that God is in every place. That's the reason Satan can't prevail, is because God is in every place. And every place is God's place. God allows freedom, but God's place is everywhere, and everywhere is God's place. So, you're here tonight in God's place. What do we need for the week ahead? I have sent out, emailed out the additional studies or additional sheets that you can look at or you don't have to look at. But I emailed those out today as attachments. Now, I know some of you can't open attachments, so next week I will have hard copies here. But the printer was broken down, so I couldn't make copies today. But I will have hard copies here next week. But they are on your email and attachments. For those of you who can get those, it's a PDF file. There's some interesting information in that you can use. Okay, so next week we're looking at chapters 8 and 9. So we're on the downhill run. We've got 3 more sessions, I think. And we'll be done.
And we'll take the rest of the year off, right?
Maybe.
Don't just give everybody will do
We
it.
could always meet at O'Malley's or someplace, you know.
There you go, we're in the park where they can watch the game.
So sure, we could think about all these chapters for a year and we still wouldn't get it all.
Well, as I said, this is an introductory. You can all become experts on your own leisure. Now you know that Revelation is something different from probably what you've ever heard it to be, and that's my primary point, is that it's something different. Some of you were in here for the Way Forward classes, and come on, all of a sudden, Rivers, Iris Rivers was in here with us, and she's from Florida.
Oh,
Yeah.
And her daughter lives here, and her daughter is having surgery on the 22nd. So Iris is coming back. So just be in prayers for Iris. I don't know any details, but maybe that we can see her and help her out or whatever, but be in prayer for her daughter. I don't know what the details are, and that sort of thing.
My sister is having issues, she has to find a facility for her husband who's having frontal lobe issues, and any prayers would be appreciated.
Okay, prayers for your sister's husband.
No.
That's, I'm always having, well, no.
No, you don't have one.
Sometimes I feel like
that
that. No, sometimes I feel like any other prayer needs? We all need to pray for our Supreme Court. Might as well be in prayer. Let's go to the Lord. Gracious and loving God, we give you thanks for the opportunity to gather together. We thank you for the freedom that you have offered us. Freedom to choose. Freedom to choose you. Freedom to not be compelled to choose you. But knowing that you are a loving Creator, one who brings life into our midst. One who calls us to be in ministry with you, to help bring life to others. Lord, be with those who have been mentioned who are in need of your healing touch, and those who are on our hearts and minds. Be with those deep thoughts and prayers that may be too deep for us to share, but we know that you wrap your arms around us. Lord, we give you thanks. Thanks for all those that have shared and for those thoughts, the wisdom that was shared this evening. We ask your love and grace to go before us, with us, and around us as we travel through New Jerusalem and out into fallen Babylon. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.
Thank you, guys. Gee, it almost felt good to be warm.